right, welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Johnny Craddock.
And I'm Darin Lundberg.
And here at NostalgiaCast, we like to take movies from our childhood and we watch them again as adults, and then we see how they hold up. And for this episode, I chose Better Off Dead, 1985. But before we get into it, Darin, why don't you give us a quick recap of last week's episode?
Okay, so last week we talked about Three Amigos, directed by John Landis, comedy giants, Steve Martin Short, Chevy Chase. And it was my choice, obviously. It's just been a movie. The funny thing about the episode is I said it was made in 86, and then I literally said, so it's been what? It's been making me laugh for 24 years, which my math was way off. It's 34 years since it's been out. So I guess I took a 10-year break in between when it didn't make me laugh. I don't know. We'll just see. We'll just chalk it up to that. But yeah, Three Amigos has been big. It's just got the silly kind of humor. I think both of us came out worth remembering, correct?
Yep, I think that's right.
Okay, and that's just because it's just so silly, and you have to, like you said, you have to be in the mood for it. It is kind of like a midnight movie. We talked about obviously John Landis's direction and how it's just like we've talked about so many times. You just want to sit back and let your guys do what they do and be able to capture the magic. And we also talked about how it was it was a remake or maybe an adaptation of Seven Samurai, and it's been adapted so many times. That story, I think, is just so elastic that it works. And I wouldn't quite call it in the same league as Seven Samurai or Magnificent Seven, because the Amigos are idiots. Galaxy Quest, the Tim Allen, Sigourney Weaver, Alan Rickman characters, they're idiots. They don't know what's going on. The Bug's Life, the circus troupe, they're idiots. But they learn to become a team, and that's kind of an added spin to that story. But again, Three Amigos is not for everybody. Like we said, there's a few scenes that are the singing bush or whatever, or the desert scene where Martin Short eats dirt. It just has to strike you in a certain way. So if that doesn't make you laugh, then it's not the movie for you, and that's okay. But it did make us laugh, and I think that was the point.
Yeah. All right, cool. So we both agreed worth remembering, and that was a fun conversation we had. But for this episode, I wanted to pick another 80s movie, Better Off Dead. So let's get into that, and let's watch the trailer first.
Does it ever feel like everyone's got more going than you do? Oops. That everyone is smart.
So you're Al Myers' kid?
Yes, I am.
You look pretty stupid to me.
Thank you.
You say the best skier in town just ran off with your girlfriend? Even your younger brother does better than you do? And that nobody even cares?
Beth broke up with me.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, you might be right. But remember one thing.
I haven't even been to New York City.
Nobody was ever better off dead.
The truth is, I could outski you any day of the week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you want a race? I'll take you on any day, sucker.
Go that way, really fast. If something gets in your way, turn.
All you need is guts.
All right! Now turn!
I'm gonna race, I'm gonna lose, and I'm gonna die, in that order.
Go!
And you'll never doubt yourself again.
He's skiing on one ski!
Better off dead.
And that's a real shame when folks be throwing away a perfectly good white boy like that.
An abnormal look at a normal teenager.
All right, so Better Off Dead, 1985, directed by Savage Steve Holland, and starring John Cusack, Kim Darby, David Ogden Stiers, Diane Franklin, and then Curtis Armstrong. So, Darin, I chose this movie because I recently saw a vehicle on the road that sparked my memory of this movie, and that was the Camaro Super Sport. And I'm not quite sure the car I saw was the exact 1967 model, but it looked just like the car from the movie. And so I was like, oh, that's the Better Off Dead car. So that's what made me want to talk about this movie. And by the way, I love that car. I've always wanted to have that car, and so maybe one day I will. But yeah, so Better Off Dead, John Cusack movie, 1985, like I mentioned. And real quick, I wanted to mention this. 1985, I can't really think of a whole lot of movies that came out that year. I know a lot did, but the ones that I think of initially are Back to the Future and Better Off Dead. was like the only two movies that I know for sure came out in 1985. I'm pretty sure you probably have a lot longer list that you can rattle off. But what are some other movies that came out that year that you can think of?
Let's see. I think Breakfast Club came out in 1985. They had, let's see, the Goonies. We talked about that. What else did they have? I'm just trying to think like kind of movies that are teen movies. Teen Wolf, I think, came out in 1985. Legend, we talked about that.
Okay.
Clue came out in 1985. Just trying to think of others. The Black Cauldron.
That's the thing. While I was watching this movie, I really had a hard time thinking of other movies that reminded me of this movie. I was like, what else is like this movie? You know, I knew Back to the Future came out that year, but it didn't really remind me of it. And I was like, what other movies are kind of dark subject matter, but quirky and just silly and funny. And the only ones I could really think of, and the reason for thinking of these ones is because John Cusack's in both of them. And that's, you know, One Crazy Summer. And Sure Thing. I know One Crazy Summer also directed by Steve Holland, but Sure Thing wasn't. I'm not sure who directed that one, but
that's Rob Reiner.
Oh, Rob Reiner. Okay, I do remember those two movies as kind of like a standout John Cusack movies, and so those came to mind while I was watching it. But so anyway, my history with the movie for the most part is I don't really remember when I first saw it. All I know is it's a movie that I watched a lot, like other movies in my childhood growing up. We had like probably a dozen video cassettes that had these movies on them, and we just burned those movies to the ground. We just like watched them over and over and over again. And so this was one of those movies too. And I always liked it. It was always a fun movie. I'd always walk in, and whenever they were watching it, I would just kind of plop down and watch it with them. And it always made me laugh. And so what I did was, for this podcast this time, I wanted to kind of like just first time watch it to experience it. So I watched it twice, and I watched it the first time. I just let it like kind of remember what the movie was and what I thought was so great about it. And the second time I thought, I'm going to watch it with a more critical eye this time. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to try to like ask questions and, you know, figure out why they do certain things. And I started just noticing things like, where does the paper boy come from, and how does he get on the mountain with his skis on his bicycle wheels, and why doesn't the garage door open when he pushes the button? You know, like all these stupid things that happen. And why doesn't the whole party blow up when Mrs. Smith blows her face off? You know what I mean? How come nobody else blows up? But while I was asking those questions, I started to realize I don't need an answer to these questions. You know, I can just watch this movie, and I'm really not supposed to know the answers to these questions. So there's that. But anyway, that's my experience with it. And like I say, I saw the car, I wanted to revisit it, and so I'm happy that we're doing this one. But tell me your experience with this movie and your history with it.
Okay, well, I have a little bit of a confession to make. I know I said at the end of last episode last time that it's been a couple decades since I've seen the movie. So the thing that happened was we sat down, me and my wife, it's been a big part of her childhood. And so we sat down to watch it. And as I was laughing at a lot of the things, my wife turned to me and she said, have you seen this before? You're laughing like way too hard at a lot of these things that should be more memorable. And I thought, yeah, I've seen this. And the movie kept going. And I know the Paperboy stuff by heart. The $2 stuff, the way that he's chasing him through like the dark, you know, it's dark and misty and he's trying to outrun them. I remember all that, but it's slowly, there's a part that when it hit me there's a part where his mom is cooking dinner. It's one where they're doing like, she's putting like the green slime down on the plate, and he kind of leans in to touch it. And I leaned over to my wife and said, that'd be funny if it bites him. And that's when the thing started, it moved and crawled away. And I burst out laughing. And again, my wife said, you're laughing a little too hard. Like, it seems like it's surprising you. And so I don't think I've seen this movie. It's, like I said, I memorized everything. I knew everything by the specific scenes by heart. But I think this is, I didn't remember the finer details. I didn't remember the love story. I didn't remember the thing with the jocks. I didn't remember a lot of the laugh lines like I was laughing at. And I think what it is there are some movies that are so iconic and so much a part of the lexicon that even if we haven't seen these movies, they're ingrained in our brains, in our DNA. And so I think Better Off Dead is just one of those movies that is so ingrained, and you know bits of it so much. You know, it's a shame when they throw out a perfectly good white boy like that. You know, all those lines are part of our lexicon. So, you know, there are other movies like that too. There's Psycho. I'm pretty sure there are people that haven't seen Psycho, but they know, if you show them an image, they know instinctively what movie that's from, even if they haven't seen it. Does that make sense? Does it seem like Better Off Dead would be one of those movies?
Yeah, I would definitely say that, because I would say that this movie is a definition of a cult classic. I think it kind of falls under those guidelines. Probably didn't make a lot of money initially. I'm not quite sure what it made or if it was successful or not. But then later finds a following and becomes super popular with, you know, certain groups of people. And so to me, I would say it's a cult classic. But yeah, there are other movies that I know of that I know I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I've never seen the entire film all the way through. One example is Apocalypse Now. I've never seen the whole movie all the way through. I've seen, you know, the first sequence with Martin Sheen. I've seen like the famous lines that are quoted and all the explosions and things, but I've never actually watched the whole movie. But yet I feel like I have. You know what I mean? I feel like I don't really need to see it because I know what it's about. I know, you know. So yeah, I understand what you're talking about. So maybe that's what happened to you. Maybe you just kind of grabbed on the pieces of it here and there and then thought, oh yeah, I've seen that. You didn't really need to go see it, you know?
Right. And it's, whenever people would bring it up, I knew exactly, like they would quote lines from it. I knew exactly what movie it was from. And I would tell people, yeah, I've seen that. And so now I'm kind of embarrassed that it kind of dawned on me that no, I don't think I have, because I don't remember these specific scenes. But yeah, I do agree with you. It is a cult classic. I don't know, like cult classics, I don't know if the definition of them is they're not popular when they come out. I don't know if that's specifically one of the specifics that it needs to fit. I know that the movie grossed somewhere around $10 million, so it wasn't a huge hit. But I do agree with you. It is a cult classic is a movie that kind of takes on a life of its own, even if it's not popular at the time, even if critics don't like it. Eventually, it picks up and it does become, you know, there are stories of John Cusack, you know, his politics. We won't go into that stuff, but I think there is a story where he was arrested for protesting or something, and he was in prison, and there were prisoners in the jail that would come up to him and ask, "Hey, where's my $2?" So, you know, it's even it's part of that lexicon. It's part of everybody's mindset, even if you know, even if it isn't a big hit at the time. I don't know. I just I'm kind of embarrassed that I haven't seen this movie, but I'm glad that I did. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think so. So real quickly, what would you say this movie, what's the point of this movie? What's it trying to do? What's it trying to convey? Okay.
Well, the thing that I noticed and the thing that I really picked up on and I just adored about the movie, there was, you know, the teen comedies, right? The teen comedies of the time, you know, the Risky Business that came out, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Breakfast Club also came out in 1985. Forgot to mention that one. Even the later ones, you know, Teen Wolf or you know, and they spun off into the 90s teen comedies and stuff that's now like the Superbads and the Judd Apatow movies, things like that. But what I noticed, it's not just one of those movies. It is a knowing satire of teen comedies. And what's interesting is, I don't know at the time if teen comedies were an actual, Revenge of the Nerds is another thing, Porky's is another thing. All these sex-driven comedies that were out at the time, I don't know if it was such a big thing at the time that it could qualify as a satire. But I did notice, the first thing that I noticed was, where I really started picking up on this, was they have a flashback. You know, Lane keeps having flashbacks to when he met Beth. There's the time when they're at the table and they think they have something in each other's nose, and it goes on for a while. But he has a specific flashback where they're in his car and his tires get stolen for whatever reason. But as the camera's moving, you hear them in the back seat, and you hear Beth say, "Would you relax? It's just our virginity." And I started laughing at that because how many of these sex-crazed comedies, the Porky's, the Revenge of the Nerds, how many of those comedies are about, and even Grease to a certain degree, even going further back, even The Graduate, there's a reference to The Graduate when he goes and what's the little brother's name? Is it Bridger? Is that his name?
Badger. Is it
Badger? Okay, Badger. Sorry, I got the jur right. But there's the part where Lane comes home after the New Year's party and he has all the women in his room. And there's a shot of Lane entering the room through the woman's legs. That's a direct lift from The Graduate. It's making a comment on it. Going back to the sex craze stuff, Grease, the whole point of that movie is Zuko trying to get Sandy's virginity. That's his whole goal, is to get her in the sack. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, how many of those characters were after that one specific goal? And it was just funny to hear Beth be the one to say, relax, it's just our virginity. It's a way of kicking it right out. It's a way of saying we're aware of what these teen comedies are, but no, we're not going to, we're going to kick all this stuff out. And so it does kind of, you mentioned The Sure Thing with John Cusack. What's interesting about that movie too, is it is a sex-driven comedy. That's where the title to The Sure Thing is. But he has the relationship with Daphne Zuniga in that movie. And the whole movie, he's trying to get the sure thing, but he becomes closer to the Zuniga character. So by the end, when they kiss, it's earned. They've gotten to know each other. And so it's a little more chaste. And I noticed some other things too, just grabbing my notes. There was with the suicides, that's Harold and Maude, right? Harold in that movie is always trying to kill himself, and it's used for humor. Like I said, there's the Bridger's room with the women. There's the virginity. Charles's subplot, how he says that he can't get drugs because it's such a small town. And so he has to sniff Jell-O. He has to sniff the snow. There's the part where he's talking to Lane and he's like, I've got to get back because my cousin's making this eggnog with, lighter fluid.
Charles.
Oh, hold on, wait a minute. Wait 1 second. I think I'm onto something here. This is pure snow. It's everywhere. Have you any idea what the street value of this mountain is?
And how many of these teen dramas or teen comedies have a bit where there's the friend that gets into drugs and has that trouble and the protagonist has to get him out of it? But again, that's making a comment on that and saying, we're aware of that, but we're not really going to deal with that this time. We're out. The one that I laughed at, had a big laugh with, was when Lane's out driving and he runs into the two Asian guys. And having just written an article, I might link to it, but I just wrote an article about Asian representation in film and how we've been treated. I'm half Asian, and so I kind of took it personally, but Asians have been treated very disrespectfully in movies. There's 16 Candles, where the Long Duck Dong character is sex-driven. Whenever he enters a room, there's a gong sound. He's a feminine character. That the girl that he falls in love with is the manly character. She's twice the size of him. And so when the two Asians showed up, I thought, oh boy, here we go. My eyes automatically started rolling. But then one of the guys in the car goes, he picks up the speaker goes, and so it's come down to this. And I just started laughing because it's taking those tropes and it's saying nope, and it tosses them right out.
Truly a sight to behold. A man beat the once great champ, now a study in moppishness. No longer the victory-hungry stallion we've raced so many times before, but a pathetic, washed-up, aged ex-champion.
All right, let's go.
And so it's poking fun at all those tropes. You have the douchebag jocks. You have how many movies? I know what happened in Fast Times. I know what happened in Teen Wolf. How many times does the hero go after the hot girl, but then he ends up with the best friend or the girl that's not so hot, but that's attractive, in a different way. It's her personality. How many movies do that? And that's what happens here. He's after Beth, but he ends up falling for Monique, right? Right. I just thought there were so many so many of those tropes that were taken, and especially when Charles comes out, and the last trope I want to mention, that there's more, but the last trope, and I laughed out loud because again, it disarms you and it says, we know what's going on. When he's talking to Lane and he goes, Lane, I have been in this high school for 7.5 years. I'm no dummy. You know, that's a trope where even Grease, you have John Travolta, you have Olivia Newton-John, you have Stockard Channing, Jeff Conway, who are these 30-year-old they're these 30-year-old actors pretending like they're in high school. And so it's just a trope, another trope that they took and they threw it right out the window. And I just adored that stuff. But what's your opinion on that? I don't think the teen comedies they're obviously not as heavy as they are with the Apatow generation and the Seth Rogen generation. But to me, the movie seemed very prophetic. It seemed ahead of its time. It seemed to recognize, it took all these movies from the past and commented on it. But when you look at movies from the future, it also keeps those tropes for movies that they made 10, 20, 30 years from then. I just thought it was, there's the thing with Bohemian Rhapsody, and somebody did a video on it, how Walk Hard is like a parody of all the biopics. And then Bohemian Rhapsody fit right into all the tropes. And it was embarrassing for a lot of people to see Bohemian Rhapsody do that. I just think it's interesting seeing Better Off Dead lay the foundation for movies that were coming from the past and from the future. What do you think about that? How did you see that in the movie?
Well, I definitely see your point. And I think it's cool if that was on purpose. I just don't know if it was on purpose or not. Like, did they intentionally go out, like set out to make this, a satire on all 80s movies and also future movies that are going to come out? I don't know if it was on purpose. It might have been accidental. I think it's cool. And I like that you spotted all that. I think that's awesome. But I don't know if it was purposely done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I agree with you there too. I just think that there's so many of those tropes that they introduce and then they throw out the window that I don't think that's an accident. Either if it is an accident, then Savage Steve Holland is a psychic and a prophet, because he's able to take everything that's come before and everything that comes after and kind of put a spin on it.
You mentioned Judd Apatow, and I wanted to bring this up too because I kept thinking about this while I was watching it. I kept thinking about movies that were made back then in the 80s and the early 90s. They really were just about being funny. That was their whole point. They wanted to tell a good story, but they also wanted just to make you laugh. And the comedies of today, I don't know if they're really out to make us laugh as they are out to shock us. Like, I feel like this hard R comedies, like the Seth Rogen movies, like the Knocked Up and the Superbad, I feel like they're just trying to throw as much crap in there as they possibly can to shock us and then make us laugh because it's shocking. You know what I mean? That's how I feel. That's the avenue I think they took. Whereas I would rather them actually just try to make us laugh like they used to. Just try to give us a simple story, because some of their stories are okay. If they took those stories and didn't inject all this, hard R language and graphic nudity they throw in just randomly at times, just to shock us for shock value, I think I might like those movies better. So what I'm saying is I really would rather see a movie like Better Off Dead or like, The Sure Things, or, whatever else we mentioned, Teen Wolf even, movies like that were set out to kind of just make you laugh and kind of have a good time. Whereas these other movies today are just for shock value. Right.
Would you say that the movie, well, I want to talk about this. Would you say that Better Off Dead is, it was personal to Savage Steve Holland, right? Like he took a lot of the stuff from his life.
Yeah, it was autobiographical. Did have a girlfriend that broke up with him. And he did have, I believe, a paper boy that was always after him for his money. But he was like, I'm just a teenager. I don't really have the say over the finances of the home. That's my parents' responsibility. So there was that. And also I did hear that he wrote some short films and made these short films and showed them to his friends about, someone who's heartbroken and someone who attempts suicide. And his friends laughed at it. They thought it was funny. So he was like, wait a minute, that wasn't supposed to be funny. So I thought, well, maybe there's something to that. Maybe I can make a movie, about suicide that's comical.
Lane?
What?
What are you doing?
Nothing.
Yes, you are. Oh, buck up, little camper. We'll beat that slope together.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm right behind you, buddy.
Yeah, interesting. And that gives it a little more of an edge, right? A little more of a personal stamp. When you, the Apatow stuff, it does have that personal bent to it. There is he takes a lot of that stuff. There's Funny People where they took the Adam Sandler stuff where they were friends and they were joking around from when they were first starting out. There is a lot of autobiographical stuff in there, but I agree with you. The thing with the comedies, they became. We talked in the big episode about how the comedy in there was situational. It came from the characters, an honest place, instead of just laugh lines. I don't think in this one, the stuff with Monique, when Lane, that stuff with her, when they're getting to know each other, that humanizes him in this movie. And it's the most human, sincere part of the whole movie, as opposed to the Hell's a Poppin' joke a minute type style that the rest of the movie is. When all those comedies and the situational comedy, it became something else. I do agree with you. I think movies like There's Something About Mary, even South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. I think Better Off Dead would be like a tamer version of that. It's like kind of satirizing a lot of stuff with parents and a lot of stuff with kids and what they're doing. But even South Park went for the shocks. There was I like the first season of South Park when there's a lot of situational comedy. I love the part where, they learn about the volcano and it's like duck and cover, it's just all you have to do is duck and the lava will go over you. And then later the guys are chomping at the mountain. They go, better duck and cover. And it goes up and you see their skeletons pop up and float away. So a lot of that stuff, it was shocking, but it was also funny because it was pointing fun. But then later seasons, it just became about the shock. Matt Parker and Trey Wilson, that's their names, right? I'm not mixing.
Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Okay, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. I'm sorry, I messed that up. It's been a while since I've talked about South Park. But Trey and Matt, it just became about shocking people. It became about how far can we push this before we're banned from TV. The one that I think of is there's the episode where they tried to say the word shit, as long as as many times as they possibly could, and they had a counter, and it was like, this isn't funny. Even Beavis and Butthead it was funny watching them and seeing how dumb they were, but I watched it not religiously, but I watched it a lot and was laughing at it. And then there was an episode where they were in shop class and Beavis got transfixed by the buzzsaw. And so he reaches in and he cuts his finger off. And so there's a long bit where there's blood going everywhere and they try to sew it back on and he picks his nose and it falls off again. And it was the whole duration of that segment. And I thought, I'm out. This is not, it's trying to push limits. And so I think There's Something About Mary and the Farrelly brothers that's when they started to push things. There's Something About Mary was a very adult comedy. There's the part where Ben Stiller's character gets his junk caught in his zipper and it shows it in a shot. And I thought, wow, they actually showed that. I mean, it was funny because it was so shocking. But then with the Apatow stuff, the one that I always go to, Knocked Up, I didn't mind. Funny People, I don't mind. Superbad, the one that everybody seems to really love, I couldn't get into that one. My wife and I watched it, and I think they say the F word at least 170 times or some crazy number. So it's every 5 seconds they say that word, and it's like, I get that it's teens, and I get that's how teenagers talk. When my son hears words, my 18-year-old son, when he hears words, Tanner, we've had him on the show before. When he hears words and we say, does this bother you? He says, this is nothing, like when we're watching movies and stuff, this is nothing compared to what I hear in the hallways. So at school. So I get that Superbad is teens, but if I was around teens that talk like that, I would leave. I wouldn't want to hang around them. And American Pie with him humping the pie. And it's just, I don't know. I agree with you. They're not so much funny as they are shocking.
Yeah. All right. Well, I wanted to talk about the cast real quick. So I think obviously John Cusack, is the draw. I think he did a really good job. He's really has that dry, that deadpan, face, and he delivers comedy really well.
Yeah.
So I think John Cusack was good in the movie. But the one part that really stands out to me, and we mentioned him earlier, was Curtis Armstrong. He's always playing this type of role too. He's always playing the best friend. He's always playing the kind of the obnoxious friend who's like in Booger or in Nerds, he plays Booger, and then in Risky Business he plays, I forget the character name, but he's Joel's best friend or something like that. Kind of like, anyway, so he's always playing those types of characters, and in this one he's basically the same character. He's not really playing anything different, but for some reason in this one his deliveries are just the timing is perfect. He always makes me laugh. In fact, the very first like laugh out loud moment that I have in this movie is when Curtis Armstrong is when Stalin turns to Beth and goes, "You be a fine helper. What's your name?" And Curtis goes, "Charles DeMar." I don't know why that makes me laugh, but it makes me laugh out loud every time. And then the second laugh is in the math classroom where the teacher's like spouting off all this gibberish about math, and the class is all excited about what they're hearing and everything. And then they pull out these, typewriters and printers and big old books full of their homework. And then Lane pulls out a piece of paper with gum stuck to it, and he's like, "Do homework." And then, of course, he gets called to be a part of it. But then you mentioned it earlier was his whole line about being in the class for 7.5 years and not being a dummy. That's the second time I laughed. So it's him that always brings me to laughter. And the final time that he makes me laugh out loud is in the dance, the New Year's Eve dance, where again Stalin walks up and goes,
Better shave her a little closer before you kiss her goodnight.
and Curtis just starts laughing like hysterically, and for some reason it's infectious. When I watch him laugh, like I just want to start laughing too, So I think he was underrated in this movie, and I think he did a really good job. So yeah, I really like his performance in this movie. But what did you think about him?
Well, I thought the same thing too. As soon as you see him, he had a stigma to him. So the first word I thought was booger. How gross is he going to be this time? But again, he seemed like a very sincere, funny character and human. The thing with the laugh, what cracks me up about that laugh is it's not just the laugh; it's the way that he does it. Stalin, by laughing like that, he disarms Stalin. Like Stalin doesn't have a leg to stand on. And you notice that Stalin gets annoyed and has nothing left, so he walks away. And then there's that other shot later where he and Beth are dancing, and you hear the laugh, and they split apart, and there's Charles just giggling again. And I like that he was making fun of the douchebag. Like, yeah, you think you're real funny, so this is how funny you are. Like, I'm going to make you sound like it. Talking about Curtis Armstrong and going back to the teen comedies, again, another trope is they had a lot of actors in this movie that were featured in previous and even future teen comedies. Obviously, there's John Cusack, who was in The Sure Thing, who was in 16 Candles in a bit part. You had Curtis Armstrong, like you mentioned, who's in Risky Business, who's in Revenge of the Nerds. Later, we know him from Moonlighting. You have, what was his name? Chuck Mitchell, the guy that plays the owner of the Pig Burger. He's the owner of the Porky's bar in Porky's.
So he's Porky.
Yeah, he's Porky, and so that comes from that. Amanda Wyss, who plays Beth, Vincent Schiavelli, who you talked about as the teacher, and Taylor Negron, who's the mailman that comes up, and there's the running gag with, I noticed that you're not dating Beth anymore, so I thought like I could take her to a movie. There's that stuff. Amanda Wyss, Vincent Schiavelli, and Taylor Negron were in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, all of them. What was her name? Diane Franklin, who plays Monique. She went on and was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And she was
one of the Bodacious Babes, right? Yeah, princesses. Yeah.
And even Amanda Wyss, there's a part. She was in Nightmare on Elm Street. She's the one that gets dragged across the ceiling. When she shows up at the party, one of Stalin's friends, I don't know if you noticed, but behind her, with her, is a guy in a Freddy Krueger sweater. At the party. Yeah, so they're even poking fun at that. Again, that's just another indication that Holland knew what he was doing by casting these actors. Yeah, they've been in these movies, but I think it adds to his point. He's very cagey about it. He's never actually come out and said, I don't think that it's supposed to be a satire. He just thought it was like a dumb comedy that he put together. But going back and adding to that, I just think there are too many things in this movie for it not to be a satire of those movies. I have a lot of laugh lines. What were some of the other laugh lines that you laughed at besides the Charles DeMar stuff? What were some of the lines that are iconic to you?
Well, obviously, another Curtis Armstrong line is,
Outrageous! I think I froze the left half of my brain! Look! I can't move my right arm!
he's like moving his right arm, you know? So there's that. I do like the direction that both he and Monique give him when he's trying to ski the K-12, and they're like, go that way really fast. Something gets in your way, turn. Like, it's no big deal. Like, just turn. So, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. What are some of the ones you thought of?
Okay, well, I'm going to have to go to my notes. Obviously, the one that cracked me up was I've been in this high school for 7.5 years. There's when he keeps trying to kill himself, what I thought was funny about that is you and I had girlfriends in high school and junior high school. And when we broke up, what did it feel like? What was our first what was our reaction when that happened?
It was devastating, you know? Like,
Right.
You felt like your whole world ended.
So why not commit suicide? Like when he did that the first time, and that was another thing with Steve Holland. I think there was a story too where he did try to commit suicide and he hung a rope from a pipe. And as he was doing that, his mom came he tried to hang himself and pulled the pipe down and water went everywhere. And his mom came in and yelled at him like a mom would do. And so he thought he'd put that in the movie. And so when he tries to kill himself, there's a part where he takes the primer and he's going to do it that way. He's going to light himself on fire, but then he has to sit down at the table with his family, and the neighbor woman like drinks the primer, and obviously she smokes a cigarette, and it explodes. The line where it's, well, I'm real sorry your mom blew up, Ricky. There's that line that I laughed at because it's so stupid. It's so stupid. She drinking the primer. And I don't mean stupid as in, I'm not trying to insult the movie, because even Holland says, I put some of the stuff in because it was so dumb. I put the claymation sequence of the cheeseburgers in because it was just wanted to see what it do. And when he previewed it, it got the biggest laugh. And so it was like, sure, I'll leave it in. It was just dumb, so dumb that I laughed at that. I like there's the running gag with his brother being a genius and having the laser beam and trying to build the shuttle. I liked his dad, David Ogden Stiers. He plays the typical dad. And again, one of the last I got was the first one where I thought that, they start the movie and they go out and Lane's getting the skis in his car and his dad comes out in his shorts and it seems like warm weather, but then Lane goes to the ski lift or whatever, and which they shot here in Utah. They shot in Brighton and Alta, and they shot that around here. And so when I saw that and it switched, I was like, did they jump states? Like, how did it go from sunny and warm to like sunny to like snowy weather and a blizzard?
Well, I do remember growing up in Utah. I remember like it being kind of warm where we were in the valley, and then being able to drive up to Park City or Sundance, and there was still snow on the mountain. So I can forgive that because I know that's kind of how it is. And also in Northern California, there's some good ski lodges up there. It can be warm in the valley, but up in the mountains there could be snow.
Okay. Well, that kind of ties in with what you said earlier about you trying to watch the movie with a critical eye and a lot of things not making sense. I think in that way, we're talking about movies that it's kind of like, it's not really there. It doesn't have the same joke a minute humor, but it's like an airplane movie, the Abrams Zucker movies. Those jump from sequence to sequence without any real connective tissue. And so I did do that. I started noticing, like, why did it do this? Why did it do that? How come they were able to do this? But then after a while, it's like, that's not the point. It's not trying to be a straightforward comedy. It's just these little vignettes that are supposed to be funny. Yeah. I like that. Well, there are some jokes like his mom trying to cook dinner always cracks me up. And like, she's off her rocker. I mean, her cooking is worse than a prison's menu. Like, she does the slime and she's like, oh, I forgot a few the recipe stuck together, so I had to improvise, but it has raisins in it. You like raisins. And how it crawls away, and then there's a part where she's cooking those tentacles And my first thought was, is she cooking Cthulhu? Like, there's even a part where she takes, you see the tentacles wriggling, right? But she grabs a tentacle that's not wriggling and she puts it in the pot and then it starts wiggling. So I don't know what's going on. So you had that running gag with his mom, but you also had the running gag I thought was funny with his dad, Al Meyer. I call him Mr. Meyer, where he's trying to, it was weird because all of a sudden he takes interest in what Lane's doing. He's reading that book, all of a sudden, Youth and the Drug Explosion. Like he's trying to understand his son, like his son's becoming a hooligan or something like that. And the line that I laughed at, there's a part, I think it's when after Taylor Negron comes and visits him. And he goes into the room and the dad says, come in here and sit with me, young man. And he's reading the book. And it's funny because he keeps like trying to talk to him. And well, first of all, the line is, I'm going to have to read this because I don't want to mess it up. But he sits down and goes, let me give you the bottom line. I think it would be entirely beneficial if you were to re-enter the sociological mainstream by re-engaging in the ritual act of dating members of the opposite sex. And without missing a beat, Lane and John Cusack's dry delivery, he goes, I don't want to date other girls, Dad. I want to date Beth. And I just got a kick out of that. It's so off the wall. It's so funny. And then the dad keeps looking in the book. He's like, he tries to set him up with that girl. And he's like, Lane, mellow off. Or you're really bringing me over, man. Or the right off, that kind of stuff is really funny. But then it doesn't really go anywhere. They introduce it and it's funny, but then it's kind of like the rest of the movie. There's not really a through line. It's just there to kind of comment on stuff. And so I just got a big laugh out of that stuff. Obviously the Paperboy, I did laugh at the end when they're having that race and Lane is skiing with the one thing and he's being chased and he beats Stalin, obviously. And my whole thought was that, nothing gets you motivated to win the heart of the girl you love, like a kid chasing after you for a couple of frog skins. I don't know. Just the running gags and stuff. It was just, but again, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much, me personally, if I didn't feel that satirical edge going with the movie. And I'll say it again. I just think there are too many instances where they're taking these tropes that we're familiar with and they toss them out the window. I think there are too many of those for it to be a mistake and it to be treated offhandedly. And, I think that was the point.
Okay. Real quick, I wanted to bring this up only because while I was watching it, I kept being reminded of an old friend of ours. And I think John Cusack, young John Cusack, looks a lot like our friend, Mike C. I guess we'll call him Mike C. Or we can call him M. Cornick, whatever you want to call him. You decide. Either way. But anyway, John Cusack looked a lot like Mike. And even his delivery on some things that we've done in the past, little short films we made, the way he would deliver lines was like, that's just how Mike would have done it. That's what I kept thinking.
I even talked to my wife. I agree with you. There was a point in the beginning where I turned to her and I said, does that look like Cornick? And she goes, yeah, kind of, because he's got that face that kind of tapers off into nothing, like Cornick had. So that was interesting. What the thing that going back and reading our past or listening to our past episodes, the thing that I've noticed is that I bring up Roger Ebert a lot. The topic that I kind of want to talk about is I sent you, I watched the movie and what I do is I watch movies and then I'm like, well, I wonder if other critics have picked up on this, if I'm wrong or whatever. So I read other critics and it brought me to the Siskel and Ebert review of Better Off Dead. And I watched it and scratched my head so hard that it started bleeding. And then I texted you and said, I need you to watch this. First of all, let's if we can, let's show the clip of the Siskel and Ebert review and let's so we can hear it right from their mouths.
But first, Roger begins with a summer holdover teenage film, just when we thought it was safe to go back into the movie theaters.
There's an old legend in show business, Gene, that you'll never have a hit if you put the word death or dead in a title. Well, that's not always the case. For example, look at Night of the Living Dead or Death of the Salesman. But it's certainly true about a new comedy named Better Off Dead, which has one of the most appropriate titles I've heard in a long time. The movie stars John Cusack, the impressive young actor from The Sure Thing, in a plot that is recycled straight out of a dozen other teenage movies, including The Sure Thing. He loves the wicked blonde girl, but the smart brunette loves him. Here's a scene where his suicide plans are interrupted by his mother.
Matches.
Oh, Lane, where have you been? We've all been waiting for you. You come and sit right down here. Have you met Monique?
Hi.
Now, in honor of our special guest, I've created dinner Mondu. First, we have French fries and French dressing and French bread. And to drink, ta-da, Peru.
Jenny Meyer, you really do go to the outer limits to make an impression.
Pour moi, où sont les toilettes?
What does that mean?
S'il vous plaît. I think she wants to use the bathroom. It's down the hall, second door, on the left.
Jennifer, this is fabulous liqueur. Reminds me of the moonshine Ricky's dead pappy used to make. God bless him.
Thrilling.
That was Diane Franklin as the foreign exchange student there, and David Ogden Stiers is the father, and Kim Darby was the mother. Remember her from True Grit? The movie's not entirely without its ambitions. It wants to create a through-the-looking-glass view of a suburban family which can never quite get things right. For example, the newspaper boy specializes in throwing the paper through the garage window.
How many times do we see that?
I think about 9 times.
Yeah, that's about right.
And then when they get the window fixed, they pushes the button and the door goes down and the window breaks again, which you could have bet your last dollar on. Maybe the raw ingredients are there in this movie for a funny black comedy about suburbia, but Better Off Dead never, ever finds the right note, and this is one of those movies where you sit there saying, not only do I know what's going to happen, but it's going to be so boring that I won't even be amused by the fact that I knew it was going to happen.
I have almost nothing to say about the film other than it is, I've seen it, I know I saw it, I've tried to not remember as much as possible. You mentioned the garage scene. I just want to repeat to people, I mean, this is the pattern of the film.
Yeah.
You see the window broken once, you see it broken twice, you see it broken 3 times. That's the whole pattern of the movie. What did this director think was funny? That we would think it would be funny that when we didn't think that it was going to break, that it did break?
Well, for example,
doesn't that director realize that we all know it's going to break again? And doesn't that director realize that that's stupid and that he makes himself look
for example,
stupid?
the whole idea of the newspaper carrier, just to take one little element in the film, this kid who rides by every day breaking the window is even in the last shot of the movie as if he is some kind of Fellini-esque alter ego.
Don't use the word Fellini anywhere near this film.
I'm sorry. I really must apologize to Fellini and to Eugene for doing that. This is a real bad movie, and I think you put your finger right on it when you said you could barely remember it. If I had totally forgotten it, I'd be a happy man.
Very good. New definition of a bad.
Okay, so that was the Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel review. What are your thoughts on that? That totally... Again, my mind was just reeling. What are your thoughts on that review?
Well, I think I sent a response to your text that I couldn't disagree more. Like, listening to them talk about this movie, I feel like they totally missed it. They just missed it completely. And in the review, they talked about how because it had the name Dead in the title, I think that right there, they didn't give it a fair shot right there, just from the title. And then in the opening sequence with the garage door windows and everything, they couldn't get past the fact that this was supposed to make you laugh. We know what's coming, but it's supposed to make you laugh. And because they couldn't get past those 2 things, they just wrote the rest of the movie off. They wouldn't even give it a chance. And so that kind of upset me because you kind of have to go into movies with a different kind of perspective in order to really appreciate what movies are trying to do, even bad ones. And so I've always made this point. It might be, kind of controversial at this point, but when I make this point, I usually get people looking at me like you're crazy. But I've often said, like, you have to, in order to understand what it's like to be a police officer, you should be a police officer for a few months. In order to know what it's like to be a filmmaker, you should go try to make a movie and see what goes into it. In order to be a musician or a songwriter, learn an instrument, learn what it takes to write a song. That way you fully appreciate what these people go through and what they put into their art in order to make what they've made. And for critics just to go out there and just be like, well, it sucks because the title is Better Off Dead, and it sucks because the windows are going to break, and we know they're going to break. And so for those reasons, I just lost a lot of respect for Ebert, especially because when I was younger, I remember watching them do a review about something. It was a short film that they had made, because I often wondered, had they made their own movies? And I guess they made this little short film about Ebert's BMW or something. And they were critiquing this movie that they made, and the movie was horrible. There was nothing to it. It was just, them filming this car, and they were talking about, not even the lighting or anything. They were talking about how they didn't see the BMW symbol on the front of the car for long enough. And it was like, what? Like, what is the point of this? And I don't know, I felt like that right there kind of made me think, I don't know if I can trust this guy's opinion on anything, because I don't feel like he knows what he's talking about, because unless you've gone out and done it, unless you've really tried to do it, you don't understand what it takes. Like I said before, even bad movies take a lot of work, and they're hard to make. And so I try to appreciate movies from that angle when I watch movies, and even listen to music. I try to hear it from that side of things. Like, what did they do to make this what it is? What did they do to, give this final result that I'm looking at? And so when I look at it that way, I tend to appreciate it more or less, because then I can go, well, I know what it takes to make that, and I know they could have done it better. So that's why I think this way. Or they did it exactly right. Or had they just done this, it could have been better. You know what I mean? So there's those things that kind of I kept thinking about while I was watching this review. And I don't know, it kind of made me mad when I watched the review, because I feel like they just totally missed it completely. They missed the whole point of what he was trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. And I agree with you. Not every critic is going to be 100% all the time, because your experiences are different. The thing that irritated me about the review, again, I bring up Ebert a lot. I know he's a Pulitzer Prize winning critic, and he's very influential. And Siskel and Ebert are probably the only critics that are right there in your face. They're very front and center. We know their faces. We know what their thumbs look like, for crying out loud. And I just think they missed the boat on this movie by so wide. It was just probably the most obvious example of get off my lawn film criticism that I've seen. It just seemed like it was beneath them. And again, I don't know, like we brought up, if the teen comedy had been big enough that they understood what it was trying to say. Again, I personally think, and going off the assumption that I haven't seen the movie, that's what I've been, since we watched it, that's the assumption that I've had. I watched it with fresh eyes. Seeing all the satire stuff, I 100% believe that the movie is poking fun at these teen comedies, these sex comedies, these teen dramas. And I don't know if it was a big enough trope, and I don't know if it had become what it became later at that time, that they understood what it was doing. And to hear Ebert say that, oh, this is supposed to be like a laser focused or like a microscope on teen life, I thought, that's not what it's trying to do. Like, if you approach it that way, obviously that it won't work. But it's just so off the wall, a lot of this humor, that there's no straight through line. Like all these other Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I adore, there's it's funny, but it's situational comedy. It's not the same Airplane or Clueless. That's another movie that I would compare to this, is Clueless in 95. The Cher character is, and Amy Heckerling, again, that's another Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The way that she talks, it seems very satirical, but I think, what's funny about that is that's actually how kids talked in that time. And so it was very satirical of that. But I like I said, I don't know if they realized that that's what was happening. I think they just missed it by a mile, and just listening to them talk, it was like, well, you obviously didn't get the point of what I thought they were trying to do. And I agree with you. They wrote it off because of the title, because they focused on that thing. Yeah, it's the thing with the new, it lasts for maybe, they say it like happens like dozens of times. I think it only happens 4 times with the dad and the paperboy. But it, like I said, with critics, it sometimes depends on your situation. Field of Dreams is my favorite movie, but it's my favorite movie because I take it personally. There are themes, there are story beats, there are characters in the movie that speak to me on a personal chemical level. And so it's the movie that I think of that I take the most personally, that speaks to me the most. But I cannot expect you to watch Field of Dreams and have it be your favorite movie, because our experiences are different. But and I don't know, what do you think about that so far? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I think movies are subjective, and it basically depends on what you're going through at the time when you see the movie, how you're going to react to it. You know, like you said, it's personal for you. Field of Dreams is a personal movie for you for personal reasons, and it's the same thing for me and Princess Bride, and we did A Few Good Men. A Few Good Men's one of them. Even movies like Memento or The Dark Knight, those are personal and they're subjective, and it really depends on your mood when you watch the movie. Maybe they were in their bad mood during the viewing of Better Off Dead during that screening, maybe.
Right. And even there's a story where John Cusack, he makes the movie with Savage Steve Holland, and then they made One Crazy Summer. And I think the story goes, there's the interview that I read, Holland said that he screened Better Off Dead for the people or for a school or some building, they screened it. And John Cusack sat down and watched the movie for the first time. Within the first 20 minutes, he stood up and he left the screening. And so Holland was like, well, that's weird. I'll have to talk to him in the morning. And so when he met with John Cusack on set the next day, John Cusack got in his face and said, "You have embarrassed me. You totally misled me what this movie was supposed to be. Do not talk to me anymore because you've embarrassed me." So even John Cusack, who's in the movie, even he didn't understand what was going on. And again, I don't know. I believe that the movie is a satire, but I don't know that Holland got that across to his cast. I think he just said, we're going to have a silly, fun time. But I think John Cusack thought that he was making another sure thing, that he was, eventually he made Say Anything. He was making a straightforward comedy, and it just hit him the wrong way. So even John Cusack, who's in the movie, it hit him different.
Well, that could be one of the reasons why it's so funny, because John Cusack is playing it straight. He's playing it, like a serious character, which is why everybody else is so, offbeat and funny, because he's the straight man in that movie.
Yeah.
If we're done with the Ebert review, let's talk about the animation in the movie. Okay. There is animation in the movie. There's a few sequences. The opening credits are animated, and also there's the scene, the claymation scene with the hamburger that plays the Van Halen song, and then there's the what's the other one? There's one more animated sequence.
He's in the lunchroom and he's drawing, and then the drawing starts in Beth's voice.
Yeah. So what did you think about all the animation in the movie? You think it worked?
Well, this kind of ties in with the not understanding what the movie's trying to do. The first thought that I have in my notes here, when the movie starts off with that animated sequence of the girl screaming and she's carried off by the monster and the night chases after her, my first thought was, well, this is a weird, off-putting way to start a movie. Like, I didn't expect it. But then when I thought about it, movies like The Lady Eve in 1941, Preston Sturges, I believe, the Pink Panther movies, every one of those movies that cracked me up starts off with that animated sequence. It's a mad world starts off in that animated sequence. Even Catch Me If You Can. There's, it's a trope that's been going on for decades. So I didn't mind that. Obviously, it took me off guard. But then when I thought about it, it's like, but other movies doing that too. Why do you have a problem with this? Like, you personally, Darren Lundberg, you need to get over yourself and appreciate this. Like, you shouldn't be nitpicking that when there are other movies that do the same thing. I'm glad that it didn't become a huge part of the movie. I would say it takes up maybe 3% of the movie. There are just those 3 little bits that are animated. So it's not like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's not like a Song of the South, Mary Poppins type thing. But I just thought, especially the claymation sequence, it's just part of the vibe of the movie. It's off the wall. It's throwing everything it possibly can to see if something sticks. So the animation, of course, it would have that in there.
Yeah. I appreciate the animation. In fact, that's how I got my kids to sit down and watch it with me. I told them, hey, there's a singing hamburger later on in this movie. And they're like, oh, really? So they want to sit down and watch it because they knew a singing hamburger was coming. But as far as, animation in movies, I think it has its place. And I think that it works in this movie. Like you said, it's not overdone, which is also good. They didn't overuse it. I think it's actually just the right amount. And it works. And it's there and it's kind of funny. But what was the other side note I wanted to mention was that Steve Holland actually went on to animate the whammy in the game show Press Your Luck. I'm not sure if you knew that or not, but he was the one who animated the whammies.
Really?
So, yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool.
The whammy, that was claymation too?
No, it wasn't claymation. It was just animated.
Okay, maybe I'm remembering it as claymation, but he did that. Huh? That's interesting. Did he animate the stuff in here? I know he didn't do the claymation for the hamburgers or the Van Halen song.
I'm not sure, but I do think that the drawing, the sketches that he's done in the lunchroom, they look very similar to how the whammies turned out. So I would assume that he animated that himself.
Okay, well, that's interesting. That's nice. I don't think he's had a huge career after this. Did he hit it big with this and One Crazy Summer and that was it?
That was about it. Yeah, I don't know of much else that he's done. I didn't really do much research for this, but I know he's famous for the whammy.
Okay, all right. Well, I know that he did, just recently, Fairly Odd Parents. I think he had a hand in that, but nothing big as far as that goes. But that's fine. Like I said, the animation, it's why not? All this funny stuff is, why not throw an animated sequence in there? There's nothing wrong with any of that at all. And even though he hasn't really had much of a career after, I think it's just one of those things where if you can make a movie like this, if you can have a Better Off Dead and you can have people quoting it constantly, then you've made it. You've made enough of an impact. I think even, I don't want to compare it. It's not that much of a great movie, but Orson Welles, if he'd made Citizen Kane and said, I'm out, and didn't do anything else, we would still remember that movie, right? So even though Holland hasn't had much of a career, I think Better Off Dead, making that movie, that's earned him a pass. He doesn't have to do anything. He's made something that's indelible.
All right. Well, I think that'll probably wrap us up. I wanted to do one extra thing, but we can do that in our little outro segment. So
okay. Well, are we going to do the Worth Remembering or I think everybody knows where we are. Are we going to do the Worth Remembering Worth the remake, or are we just going to skip past that this time?
We should do that. Okay. I'll just go first. Worth remembering.
Okay. If you were to ask me, I would absolutely say this is worth remembering. I just think, even though it's embarrassing that I realize I hadn't seen it before, I get why it's remembered. There are movies that you see that everybody talks about and just build, and you watch them and you're like, what? Like, this is what's remembered? But this movie, from the very first 10, 15 minutes in, I got what it was trying to say. And I was like, I completely understand why people adore this movie so much. And like I said, if it wasn't for those satirical little beats that they had, I don't know if I would have liked it as much. I think there is a point to the movie that raises it above, the stuff with the suicide, the stuff with not Curtis, that's his name, with Charles laughing at Stalin's joke. Things are just pitched at a level that's higher than what you're used to. And so it's obvious to me that the movie's trying to pick on things that were around at the time, and it's very prophetic, things that were going to come around later. And I think it stands the test of time. You could watch this movie and it's still poking fun at tropes, at comedy bits that are still in movies today. So I definitely think it stands a test of time. There's no reason to remake it. It's great. I just think it's great. I agree with everybody who's been telling me, who's been reciting the dialogue to me, and I've been looking square in the eye, looking people flat, square in the eye and saying, yeah, I've seen that. So I apologize for coming off as a liar, but I do get why you like that movie. And I do appreciate that I've finally seen it. So.
Well, I would agree with you. I think it's a great movie, definitely worth remembering. And we'll come right back and we'll give you our top 5 John Cusack movies. So stick around.
Okay.
They say that breaking up is hard to do.
Okay, well, that was our talk on Better Off Dead. But before we wrap things up, I would, like I mentioned, we'd like to kind of give a shout out to John Cusack, because one of his movies, High Fidelity, they make these top 5 lists of, top 5 songs, top 5 movies and all that. So I thought it'd be fun if we did our own top 5 list, but we did it of John Cusack movies.
Okay.
So I asked you to make your top 5 John Cusack movie list. And did you do that? Did you make one?
I did. Let me ask you a question. I'm not really big into making making lists according to what I prefer. I just think that kind of defeats the purpose of enjoying something. But I did pick my top 5 favorite. I just didn't put them in order. Did you put you in order of preference? Did you put yours in a countdown for them?
Yeah, I put them in order based on what I thought his performance, how good his performance was, and how good the movie was as a whole. So
okay, and I just picked them according to the way they were released. So you mention your number 1, and then if we happen to have the same, then we'll just a conversation. We'll just keep talking about those. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so here we go. Number 1, John Cusack movie of mine is, and you know me, so you know this is going to be number 1, Grosse Point Blank.
Right. Okay.
Did that one make your list?
Yeah, it did. I've got it on my. Why is it your number 1? Explain why it's your number 1.
Number 1, I think first and foremost is the script. I love the script in this movie. I love the premise behind a serial killer or a assassin, whatever you call it, hitman, trying to go straight. I love that idea. Sometimes there's movies that come out that you kind of wish you had thought of or that you had written, and this is one of those ones. When I saw it, I thought, what a great idea. Why didn't I think of that?
Right.
So that's why that's up there. Plus, I think his performance in this movie is great, and I love the chemistry between him and Minnie Driver's character. And, of course, Alan Arkin is just hilarious in it. And there's a lot of great things, Dan Aykroyd as well. But overall, I think his performance is just so endearing in this movie, and then also the movie as a whole is just really funny and really well put together. So I love that movie.
Okay.
That's number 1 for me.
And it's got, I agree with you. I think it's probably if you think of John Cusack, I think it's between that and Say Anything maybe that are his top tier performances. I love the lines in Grosse Point Blank. Some of the lines are just so off kilter that they're memorable. My favorite, it's not even a John Cusack line. It's when they're at the diner and Aykroyd's character comes in and they talk about Boudreaux for a bit, and then Martin Blank starts talking about what the dog meant, and Grosser goes, "Hold on, Chatty Cathy, clip your string. I don't need to know." So I just thought, instead of saying "shut up," it's or when Martin's talking to Debbie and he goes, we should go to the dance together. I think if we could, form a team, and I just think it'd be better than if we lone wolfed it. It's got some really good lines. And what I liked, if you listen to Cusack talk about that movie, he says that he had a script and it was his first big as a producer, and he wrote the script and everything. And it's interesting. He said he had the characters and he had the actors in mind for the characters. So he just had the script written enough that you got the gist of what a character would say or what they would do. And if you bring Dan Aykroyd in, you know that Dan Aykroyd's going to give you some golden stuff. And so, or Alan Arkin, he said they didn't really write a lot of the dialogue. They just said, you go and you bring what you need to this character. So a lot of the dialogue was improvised, and I think it just messes. It meshes together, and it just works as a whole. I just think it's really funny. So that's a good choice. I do have that would technically be my number 4. It was released in 97. So that's what I have. What was your number 2 for John Cusack?
Okay, number 2, you also mentioned this one, is Say Anything.
Okay. And
this is a movie that really, I think when I first saw it, I was going through a breakup. And so I think this is why this one, touches me, because like you in Field of Dreams, I was going through something at a time when I watched Say Anything. And so I really related with the character right away. But anyway, Say Anything, I think, again, like you mentioned, his performance in Say Anything is just, a different level. Like, I think he really transcended what do you call it? He brought the character to a different level, that's what I want to say. Like, he was able to
Yeah, well, that's obviously it's I get it. I understand what you're saying. It's a Cameron Crowe script. I think that was his debut, directorial debut. So that's obviously going to hit on a different level than most average, like Better Off Dead. It's going to hit on a different level than most comedies or most teen romances. What was your favorite line from that movie? I think you quoted it all the time when we were in high school.
Yeah. My favorite line from that movie is, "She gave me a pen."
Yeah,
I gave her my heart, and she gave me a pen.
And it's just delivered with the Cusack drollness, right? And like you said, I do. That was in 1989. I have that as my second. And again, when I say second, I mean it's just that was on my list. It's the order of release. What was your third favorite?
Well, number 3, we already talked about Better Off Dead. So we don't really go into too much detail about that. Since we already spent an hour talking about it. But again, his performance in Better Off Dead is just top notch. I think it's great. I think his deliveries of his lines were just really funny, really well done, and he really has a way of just bringing you in. When you watch John Cusack, he has a way of he has a stage presence, or the camera really likes John Cusack, is what I want to say.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that really shines through in Better Off Dead as well as these other movies that we've mentioned.
Okay. It's funny. We just talked about what I thought of Better Off Dead. It didn't make my list for some reason. I think maybe because I think he gives maybe better performances. Obviously, you pick Grosse Point Blank. Say Anything, you pick that too. My number 1 of the first release that I have The Sure Thing. We mentioned that briefly. Again, Rob Reiner, very chaste movie. I think it elevated him from the 16 Candles. It's weird, like we talked about, Sure Thing was released the same year as Better Off Dead, 85. So maybe that tied in with what Cusack thought. He made The Sure Thing, which is a very straightforward, well-received comedy, and then to go and make Better Off Dead, he might have thought he was making the same thing. I just think that it's a very well put together movie. It's, like I said, it's about not just the characters ending up in the sack together. They make a connection, and then at the end of the movie, they kiss. I just think it's a very charming, we use that word a lot, especially for the big episode, but it's a very charming, down-to-earth kind of comedy. What was your number 4? Is that where we're on?
Yeah, number 4. I picked Bullets Over Broadway.
Woody Allen.
And my reason, Woody Allen. Not that I'm a big Woody Allen fan, but I think he does once in a while make a good movie. And this is one of those movies that really kind of hit me, because I really like movies about plays or movies. So if you have a play within a play or a movie about making movies, I really respond to those. And I loved just the funny characters in this. And I love the fact that it has this kind of mafia spin on it too. So I like the premise, I like the idea behind it. And again, Cusack gives a great performance. And so I keep going back to that, just how good he is and his deliveries and what he brings to a character. I think he does a really good job in this one as well.
Right. Okay. So the next one on my list, which is, we talked about The Sure Thing, Say Anything, The Grifters is my number 3. A Stephen Frears movie. Martin Scorsese produced it. I think the thing about The Grifters, we talked about con movies with Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. And I think I mentioned The Grifters. I'm not quite sure. But The Grifters is one of those, the con, the twisty, you can't really trust any character. But, John Cusack had made a name for himself. He was in, obviously, The Sure Thing. He made appearances in The Stand. He had a cameo in Broadcast News for James Brooks. He, what was other, 8 Men Out he was in. He had a cameo in The Player. So obviously he made a stamp, but him showing up in The Grifters elevated him. Again, it's all about doing more and doing the next best thing. So having him star in a Martin Scorsese produced movie was a big step, but he handles himself. He equips himself very well. Grifters is a great movie. I enjoyed his performance, that he could stand up with an Angelica Houston and Annette Bening and be totally even keel with them, that he could make as much of an impact as these greater, more revered actors of the time. So The Grifters for me is my number 4 or number 3. I had that above Grosse Point Blank because it came out in 1990. So.
Okay. Grifters didn't make my list. I thought about that one, but didn't quite make my list. Number 5 is Being John Malkovich. And again, it's kind of a dark movie, kind of a quirky, odd movie. And I think that's why this one made my list, because it was different, because John Cusack took a totally different role, something we're not used to seeing him play. And Again, he elevated the character, and so I like that one. Plus, I kind of like movies that are dark and quirky like that. You know, I like the unexpectedness of this movie, and it's just again another good premise. I like the idea of being able to see, you know, through another person's eyes. So that was kind of fun for me. So, Gross Point Blank, Say Anything, Better Off Dead, Bulls for Broadway, and Being John Malkovich.
Okay, well, just briefly on Being John Malkovich, I do agree with you. That's a performance. It's not, you know, you see John Cusack and Say Anything, you see him in Gross Point Blank, you're like, yeah, that's John Cusack. That's the John Cusack that I know and love. But in Being John Malkovich, he plays this sad sack character, right? And he, again, I think that was one that he had a hand in creating. I think he was with the studio, he was trying to partner with somebody. He said, what script do you guys have that's totally off the books and like you think would never get produced? And they showed him the Being John Malkovich script and he's like, this is the one. We need to make this into a movie. And so I don't know if he was showboating and saying that he was the one, we owe everything to him for Being John Malkovich. I have my issues with Charlie Kaufman, but I agree with you. That's a very unique movie. And he does make an impact with that. I agree with you. So my last choice for that one is my last choice for number 5, I guess, is High Fidelity, which was 2000. We mentioned that briefly. Again, it's another Stephen Frears movie. And another Gross Point Blank. He had the same producing team. I think Steve Pink, he wrote the script with. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of is the same situation, adapting a book and moving it from the UK to the US. But like we talked about, it has the top 5. There's a scene where he talks about how he makes mixtapes, and he does it in order. Like you start off big, and then you kind of settle down, and by the third one, you're like you settle in, and then you go for the big finish. And I just remember taking that dialogue and using that when I made mixtapes or mixed CDs from then on. It's just an of the moment movie that snagged. I know they just did an Amazon series with Zoe Kravitz. But again, it's one of those stories that can just be transplanted at any time and talk about teens and relationships and love. And so obviously it's got a Jack Black career-making performance in there. It's when everybody started noticing him. But again, High Fidelity is a very just crisp, of the moment, just speaks to a certain time, speaks to a certain kind of person. And so again, I think it goes away from the Being John Malkoviches and away from the Grosse Pointe Blanks, and it just settles it back into the romantic comedy type character that he plays. But I don't know, I just got a kick out of that one. I keep going back to it in my mind, so that's why I picked that one as my number 5.
Yeah, I would be curious though to know if you had to put them in order of your favorite or to your least favorite, or based on performance, what you would do. Like if you had to order them, how would you order it?
If I had to, again, the way that my mind works, I would arrange it by the movie that made the biggest stamp down to the movie that made the least stamp. But I could also categorize it by top performances. Grosse Pointe Blank would make that's the one that I think of. More than Say Anything, that's the movie that when you say John Cusack, my mind immediately goes to Grosse Pointe Blank. So I don't know if it would depend on how I attacked the list. If I did that, what made the most impact and had, cinema-wise, I think the Grifters would be my number 1 as far as that goes. Mm-hmm. But performances, I think John Cusack. Maybe I'll do that. I don't know, but that's just how I would arrange it. I just kind of get trapped, and it would take me a good 15 minutes to kind of arrange everything. Yeah. So
it's hard, it's hard to go, which one's better? Which one do I think? Because, maybe his performance is more nuanced than this one. Maybe it's not as good as that one. So it's hard. It's hard to kind of decide what goes first, what goes second. But anyway, that was fun. I think we should do more of these lists or more of these like little things or kind of fun little games at the end of our episodes. What do you think? Yeah, and we haven't mentioned this before since we started the whole YouTube thing or started up again with after our break. But for you that are listening, for you that are watching, if you like listening to our conversation on Better Off Dead, if you have any if you notice that there were some other teen comedy references that we didn't talk about, if you have a different perspective on how the movie spoke to you, if you want to chime in and give us an opinion on the Siskel and Ebert review, please do so. Please comment.
we tried to do this when we had just had the plain Libsyn, the plain audio podcast. Comment, like, find us on the web, find me on Twitter, NostalgiaCast. That's just my Twitter handle at DW Lundberg on Twitter. Find us on Facebook. We have, NostalgiaCast Facebook page. Comment there. We'd like to hear what you have to say. Let us know what your top 5 John Cusack movies are. We want to get you more involved. I did ask on Twitter and Facebook for some favorite quotes from Better Off Dead, and I think since I'm still compiling those, we'll get back. We'll do that in our feedback for the next episode. But since absolutely comment, and while you're doing that, we'll come back for our next episode with watching Better Off Dead. There's that part where Ricky's dancing, and he has the scene where he stops and everybody like gathers around him like you'd expect, and he doesn't do anything. You know what I mean? They just gather and they're all snapping, and then he just lies on the ground. And people anyway, so that particular scene, it made me think of a movie that we wanted to do from the beginning, but we might have to sidetrack that and do it later because our next episode will be week of Halloween. If we're still having Halloween, if COVID hasn't canceled that. So I thought we'd do our Halloween episode.
Okay.
So the movie that I wanted to pick is from 1985. I don't know if we mentioned it in what we just talked about. Let's see. Trying to find. So the Return to Oz I wanted to do. 1985 directorial debut of the great editor Walter Murch. I know just recently we've had some podcasts that have talked about this. We had the Cult Classic Callback podcast with Paula Deming, the Other Half podcast, Zombie Girls Horror podcast, Retro Cinema even did a recap of it. So I know that just within the past year, there have been people that have talked about Return to Oz, but I've always wanted to revisit it myself. There is a scene in that movie that still, I remember it terrifying me when we saw it in the theater. So I want to go back and see if it had the same effect on me. So absolutely bring up your Disney Plus account and watch Return to Oz, and we'll be back for a Halloween episode to talk about that.
Okay, well, like you didn't see Better Off Dead. I haven't seen Return to Oz, so this will be new for me. Yeah, so it'll be fun. So join us next time. I'm Johnny Craddock.
And I'm Darin Lundberg.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.